Welcome to Focus on Liberia. This is the Liberia History Channel. My name is Dennis Jar, and we broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm very sure you enjoyed the Lone Star Forever by the beautiful young lady there. I mean, that was beautiful, and I hope that I can get in touch with this young woman to say thank you for this very, very nice rendition. You like it too, Carl?
I love it. It's so moving. It's so moving. I wish I knew her name.
Yes,
Uh,
I'm trying to get in touch to see who she is. But that's beautiful, ladies and gentlemen. We are back with the History Channel. That's the Liberian History Channel. We've missed 2 Saturdays, and then we keep getting calls, emails, and call is not even sleeping to say why we didn't have the History Channel. So then, as I said, we are able to come out on a Tuesday instead of this usual Saturday to have the Liberia History Channel. How are you feeling today, Carl?
I'm feeling great. I had a quick vacation when my husband carried us off to St. Simon Island. St. Simon's Island is off the Georgia seacoast. Very, very beautiful place that has great historical ties to descendants of enslaved people from Liberia, Sierra Leone, the Gullah Geechee people. So we could talk about that just a little bit. I took the
Right.
kids.
I thought that was vacation and you were studying history again, Carl.
That's my passion. This is my leisure. This is not what I do professionally. This is what I do for fun. So yes, I took the children on a history tour when we were on St. Simon's Island. That was not all we did. We chilled on the beach and did a lot of other things. But yeah, it was. There's no way to go to such a place and not acknowledge what occurred there. It's all around you. The presence of history is all around you in such a place.
Yeah. Wow. All right. We've been off for a while, but we've been dealing with the birth of the First Republic, and we've been going through series. Tonight is the one that has to do with our territorial boundaries, our borders. So the way we call it tonight is Liberia's struggle to maintain its territorial borders. I mean, it will surprise you, or maybe not, that what we have today, the country Liberia, was not given to us on silver platter, right? People have
This
to
is
fight for it. We have to do things to defend it, and there were some big guys trying to take it away. And thank God for leaders that time and other Liberian people who stood their ground, and that's why we have a country today. And we're
that's
going to
correct.
go through all that today with the person who does history for fun, policy analyst Carl Family. Carl, how
Yes.
significant it is to talk about our borders?
So the last show we talked about what sovereignty meant and how it's important to have land. You can't be a country in thin air. You must have land to tie your sovereignty to. And so the struggle to maintain our land, our territory, is also the struggle to maintain our self-determination and our freedom. Without land, there's no country. Without boundaries, there's no country. So it is extremely relevant to the history of Liberia. And people need to know that Liberia exists today not as a gift, but because of struggles of many, many people who gave their lives and for what remains of Liberia's territory, which is the bulk of it, against tremendous odds. We fought the most powerful people in the world to be the Liberia we see today, and we had victory. What you see today is a result of perseverance, self determination, and people who believed in themselves.
This whole concept of land, I remember a while ago we discussed about land, and I asked you, maybe you practice now, when we say land, how you say that in any Liberian language. The Pele people call it Loy. Very important. And so when we talk of border, we talk about land. So the concept of land, even before what we know today as modern Liberia, what is that concept to a Liberian living somewhere in Memphis, Niva County, or living somewhere around Duke-Free in Sino County? Tell me about the importance of land. How is it tied to the culture and who and the identity of the people?
One of the things that makes Liberia extremely unique in the world, it is the only country in the world where 100% of its territory is owned by African people. This is only true for Liberia. This is not true for Sierra Leone. It's not true for Kenya. It's not true even for the Kingdom of Morocco. It's not even true for the Kingdom of Swaziland. You have private ownership of property in all of the countries by non-Africans. And the reason for this is because our existence, our sovereignty has always been tied to land, and our resistance against others taking land from us. Contrary to what we believe, the majority of the land that is in Liberia, the people who identify ourselves as native or indigenous Liberians, we are really the only African people who have maintained, for the most part, our ancestral land for the majority of the people that reside within the boundaries of Liberia. When you talk about tribal certificates, even the way that our land is distributed for farming is still as old as our people, is older than Liberia, the customary land use that we practice. So, the idea that we were somehow pushed off our land, I hear people say, oh, there was apartheid in Liberia. I mean, it's so contradictory to the facts. Apartheid was displacing people from the land and literally putting them in concentration camps, called townships, barren areas, and taking the bulk of the land for the people who settled. Where that is not what occurred in Liberia. Most of us still can go to our villages and say, hey, I want some place to plant cassava, and the town chief will say, okay, that your people quarter over there, the other farm area for your quarter. So we're not landless. We have land. We're just poor landowners.
Thank you. So today we're going to be talking about, as part of our series on the birth of the First Republic, we're going to be talking about Liberia's struggle to maintain its or her territorial borders. So, Carl, let's start this way. So, how did we struggle to retain this territory?
A lot of collaborative efforts. So we're going to get into a little bit. So we've seen this map numerous times during our talks here on the History Channel. The red areas represent where resettled Africans were living. So this means Americo-Liberians, which I define as African Americans, people who are descendants of people who were enslaved in the United States, and either liberated and returned to Liberia, or born free in the United States and returned to Liberia. The other group, which is larger than that group, that resided within those red areas, is what we call recaptured Africans or repatriated Africans. These are people who were captured, placed on slave ships, and unlawfully, during the time that the transatlantic slave trade had been abolished, slavery itself was still continuing in North America. So after 1808, 1809, when they abolished the transatlantic slave trade, meaning new Africans could not be introduced into the Americas legally, it still continued because the demand was still there for more human beings to be brought in. Those people, whenever rescued or caught by the U.S. naval forces, those people would then be repatriated to Liberia. And that's what we call, and what were called in those days, recaptured Africans, many of whom came from the Congo Basin, hence the term Congos. So that was a larger group. And those are people who were not, in fact, enslaved in the United States, but were rescued from vessels. Some of them, like those who settled in New Georgia, were liberated and taken to Savannah, Georgia, where they went through a tribunal for 3 years and then returned to Liberia. So the people who established New Georgia were not African Americans. They were born in Africa. They barely spoke any English even after the 3 years when they were returned to Liberia. They had to be acclimated and taught how to read and write, taught how to speak English, and of course baptized and Christianized. So this was the process of repatriating the recaptured Africans from slave ships, some of whom were repatriated from right within the territory, because at some point Trade Town and other areas within the territory of Liberia were engaged in the slave trade. And when Trade Town was demolished basically and conquered, those people who were awaiting to be shipped off into captivity were also repatriated in these red areas. And their descendants are considered Congo today, and they could have been from, the Northern Territory. So that's what that is. The green area, which is extremely important because that's where my ancestors come from, and most Liberians.
And call just to mention, I'm red green color blind, so I'm not really following. But I
Okay.
believe the red area is down along the coastline.
Yes.
And the green is all right.
So the green is the majority of the territory that was Liberia, and this is at the point of the Berlin Conference in 1880. This is what Liberia would have looked like in 1885, between there. While they were partitioning Africa, this was the convention understanding of what the Liberian territory was. So the area that is in green is the sovereign African territory within Liberia. So this is where the people still had control over their lives, and they were still living within their existing kingdoms, societies, and governmental structures. The settlement along the coast did not have the will or the power to incorporate the masses of the people, which outnumbered them greatly. I mean, it's estimated that there were about 1 million people living within the green area. And, you're talking about a population of probably around 10,000 living in the red area. So the scales are, majority of Liberians, of course, are within the green area. Most of our ancestors were within the green area, modern day Liberians. So we were not, paying taxes at this point to the Liberian coastal government. We existed within the territory, and we had our own trade routes, our own customs, our own religions. There were a lot of Muslim communities. There were a lot of communities that practiced traditional African belief systems. So this is what was going on. This was not a homogenous group, even though everybody's in green. You had the kingdom of, you had the Vai kingdom, King Massaqua's people, which pushed all the way across the river into what is now present day Sierra Leone. At that time, his people were sovereign over their territory on both sides of the river. You had in the north, you had the Mon kingdom, the Mon nation. You had Lama, Kisi. You had many people that were all tied together by a very strong political and ancient political structure that we all know as Poro. And so the Poro nation, the Poro peoples also had their structured society and way of life. You had a lot of trade going on. You had Fulani, Mandingo traders that were coming in from the north, a lot of activity along the rivers. You had massive rice plantations existing in the north that were much older than the Republic of Liberia, like the Baiting Rice Station, which existed, for centuries. Many of the people, when I was talking earlier about going to the Georgia Sea coast and being on St. Simon's Island, Many of the people that were enslaved on St. Simon's Island were rice farmers recruited or enslaved from places like the Baiting Rice Station because they were extremely valuable for rice and cotton and sea cotton farmers on the coastal southeastern coastal United States. So that's really what was happening before the partitioning of Africa. Is that within the territory you had all of these people that were basically existing as they had always existed. And one last point I would like to make is I hear a lot of times people say things like, well, why didn't the people, make everybody a part of Liberia? They didn't include the native people. There was no the people that we in this modern day look back on and call native people. They didn't think of themselves as being in need of being given a government or being implemented or incorporated into a Western style state.
Right.
These people had their way of life and they respected themselves and their way of life. They did not think that they were not sitting around waiting for someone to come and give them a country. So there was not that nobody in Africa was sitting around waiting for somebody to come and give them a country. It was the Berlin Conference that introduced this concept that no, we have to give you a country because you're.
All that is very important. So before you even get to the Berlin Conference, because as we always caution, don't read history backwards. So at this time, people came and settled along the coast. So, and the concept of all of us being one country did not exist. So these are different nations. So the need for, let's say, the settlers extending that far so quickly there was no need for that in the first place.
Not only need, there was no ability to do that.
Okay.
Right? They didn't have the power, the wealth, or the military strength to do so. So they're trading with people. And I mean, Benjamin Anderson in 1867, 1868, he takes this journey to Musadu, which is the most northern part of the Liberian territory, up the St. Paul River to its beginnings. And last time we had this program, we talked about the territory always extending to the headwaters of the rivers because you want to be in control of your fresh water supply. Right. So it was just normal that your territory extended that far. It didn't mean that you had some military conquest or that you controlled the place. It was just considered, this is your territory. Right. And so Anderson took a journey. And before Anderson went there, no one had been allowed to go there from outside before. So no one born outside of Africa had ever been that far north into the territory until African-American Benjamin Anderson, born in Baltimore. No, not Baltimore. I think he was born in Ohio. Anyway, he was born in the United States. Benjamin Anderson, who immigrated to Liberia, was fully educated in Liberia. He was the one who decided or was commissioned to take this journey to Musadu, and he wrote a detailed narrative about his trip. He went twice. His first journey to Musadu was the absolute first time that people who had not been born in Africa had ever been that far up the St. Paul River. And he documented all the kings that he interacted with, the chiefs of the towns, the names of the towns. He spelled them phonetically. He put all of the geographical coordinates in, longitude, latitude, the elevation. He measured everything with such accuracy that you can find these places on the map. And archaeologists are able to pinpoint these places on the map. If we decide to invest in digs, they can go back and look for these old towns, the remnants of these old towns, many of which, even just a few years later, when he returned to Musadu, had been destroyed by war. We talk about the ruins in Yala with the walls that have been, destroyed, that were built, 200 years ago. Well, Benjamin Anderson's narratives explain how those walls came crumbling down. It was because of many, many wars we're having in the interior over many issues. But I get ahead of myself. The important point of this is that there was not one group of people. Like the native people, we don't all have one story that we can tell in unison, and we do not all have one experience. It was already a very diverse place. We're talking about at least 14 different nations living within the territory that we call Liberia today. That's important to note.
And the thing about borders is, like you said, Benjamin went all the way to Musadu. Those boundaries were there because people knew their lines, right? So if there is a boundary between, let's say, the Kisi nation and their neighbors, and there's that river, nobody's going to cross that, right? We know that this is it. And so,
Well, yeah, you shouldn't cross, but of course, people crossed and pillaged and raided each other
yeah, for
and
wars, right?
instigated war, right? And instigated war. So this was something that was, and this was a period of turmoil. You had a shift from a prolonged period of the acquisition of human chattel and trade toward the coast, not only of human beings, but also of other goods. Agricultural products was big in this area. We talked about the rice and other items, ivory, gold, even cloth. We fixed some of the most sturdy cloth, and so it was very valuable. What we call country cloth today was very valuable to mariners. It kept them warm, in all of this. So all of these things were produced in this northern part of the country. They would be brought to the coast by enslaved people, and these people sometimes were the ones they would be chained. They'd be chained together, and they would be sold along with the goods. This happened for centuries. And what ended up happening when the transatlantic slave trade is now stopped permanently, there's other conflict that arises because now there's a shift from what is important agriculturally. Economically. And so now there's a new fight, a new struggle for relevance and for dominance. You've got old rivalries that are trying to be settled at this point as well. You have, the Muslims in the north are having conflict. There's conflict between Mandingos and Fulani. The Fulani, if you read the story of Tanneh-Chewlae, his mother was kidnapped, basically taken to be used as a slave. And this is some of the things that evoked the sense of rebellion and not only rebellion isn't the right word, evoked the sense, this need to survive and fight for self-determination in Tanneh-Chewlae. And so you've got a lot of these very old conflicts that were arising at this time between ethnic groups. So you've got ethnic tensions between the nations within the sovereign territory of Liberia.
Right.
And on the coast, you have some conflicts as well with the coastal people not being, happy with the shift in the economic structure. So imagine if you live in a society where the whole economy is now being changed from what you're used to. This causes insecurity, and so a lot of chaos was also brewing at this time. So the area, our country, our people were ripe for exploitation because we're in conflict. And whenever societies are in conflict, it's very easy for people to come from outside and cause even more harm.
Yeah, that's the old saying, the house divided against itself.
Yes.
So let's fast forward. 1884, there's this guy, the Chancellor of Germany, Otto von Bismarck, convened what we know today as the Berlin Conference. Begin us from there and how it impacted Liberia's territorial boundaries.
So basically what we have going on is the Europeans have figured out, and we talked about this in previous episodes, but the Europeans have figured out that it's not a good idea to bring a bunch of strong Africans, continue to bring Africans at great numbers into Europe and North America and the Caribbean because of what happened in Haiti and many, many subsequent rebellions. And then also, the abolition of slavery. Some group of Europeans had the brilliant idea that, hey, we don't have to bring these people to America. We can enslave them right where they are. We can exploit them without them leaving. We can take over their land. They're already broken from centuries of removing basically draining human resources out of their countries. They're weak. They're at their weakest point at, Africa. I'm talking from their perspective. So Africans are now at our weakest point. We've had tremendous human resource drain. You're talking about millions and millions of able-bodied men and women, young men and women, being, and often even children, being pulled out of our countries, our areas, our nations. This weakens a society because you have had tremendous human resource flight, or so it's worse to steal human beings from a country than it is to even steal gold or any other material wealth, because it is the humans that make you. They make your militaries, they make your thinkers, your planners, your scientists, your engineers. And when you devastate a population by pulling out 15-20% of the able-bodied people, or even more, depending on which period in history, you have what, a situation ripe for degeneration, where the society breaks down and things start to fall apart. So the Europeans have the idea now. They understand that we are at our weakest point, and they decide to go and sit and divide the land amongst themselves instead of just trading. We don't have to trade with these people. We can just take it. We can take everything. Let's divide it. But there's a problem. There's one stubborn little problem in West Africa. And this problem is, you've got this westernized Negroes. You've got Africans on the west coast of Africa, in this tiny little country, who understand the mindsets of Europeans because they are westernized. They were educated to think like them. So they know when this Berlin conference occurs that this isn't good for them. It's not good for anyone within their territory. The Europeans do not want, the same way they didn't want Haiti to stand as a testament for freedom, they didn't want Liberia to stand as a testament that Africans could govern themselves in a modern state.
Right.
So because it would serve as an inspiration to the people that they were trying to divide and amongst themselves in their land, to say, hey, if Liberia can be a country, so can we. Hence Samori Toure. Samori reached out to the Liberian government when he was fighting the French. Said, y'all join me. Join me. We can work together. We will teach you the Mandingo language. We will teach you the we can be brethren. We can fight these people together. Samori was a military genius, and he was a strategic genius, and he, in a sense, I mean, people have described him as a jihadist. People have described Samori Toure as many things, as a freedom fighter, anti-colonial fighter. He was all of those things. He did see it as a holy war. He was a Muslim. He put his religion first. He put his language first. He did many things. But the reason I'm bringing up Samori Toure is because this is the time period where he is fighting the French. And it gets into our boundary issue, because a lot of the people who were part of Samori Toure's empire were in the northernmost territory of Liberia. I want you to show the boundary again, please. I mean, the map with the green and red boundary.
Yeah, let's go back to the map.
So the whole area up there, later on, Nimba and Lofa are carved out, but most of that area becomes present-day Zerikore. The part of the Liberian territory that became Zerikore is a part of the Liberian territory that Samori Toure controlled, that the French conquered and retained as Guinea and part of Ivory Coast when you look at the northeast.
Yeah.
So that's important to mention.
I was there in Zerikore for 3 years, and I saw the statue of Samori Toure. So that entire area, I mean, people respect him.
It was Liberia. It was Liberia, and Samora acknowledged that it was Liberia, and he reached out to the Liberian government and said, "Hey, we need your help." Liberia had no military at this time. There was no AFL. There was no frontier force. So contrary to what people believe, Liberia didn't even have the power or the ability at that point to really do much as far as assisting. It was the British who first, we'll get into that in just a moment, but it was the British who first decided to help Liberia establish an armed forces, not the United States. It was the British, and that didn't go so well. But we'll talk about that shortly. So I'm going to pause there. I can't see if there's questions or if anyone has anything before. I don't want to just keep rattling on.
Right. So let's pause and take a short break.
Okay.
Adjust the camera a little bit so that you're.
Okay, my head's not in the screen. Okay. All right, no problem.
So we'll be right back.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Tanneh-Chewlae.
Welcome back to Focus on Liberia. This is the Liberian History Channel. The presenter here is FOL Public Policy Analyst Carl Family, and we're talking about Liberia's territory. There was a little struggle there, and Zerikore, where I live as a refugee from 91 to 95, that was Liberia, and you can still see, and my the little bit of Mano that I learned was from that area. And so when I came, they said, "Oh, you speaking Guinea Mano?" I said, "Of course." People are following. Stella Jeffrey said, "My favorite person, Miss Famula, is on." Priscilla is happy and that you are here, and thank you. Sandolo is kind of rallying the people to come and watch the show. Thank you, Juan Kemet, Joseph Kokro, that's Elder Kokro, all the way from Trenton. Nice to be on a little rapid from agony of speculation to a place of reality. Jeffries also, Stella also say, wow, that's why they are called the Congo people, because they come from around the Congo Basin.
Yes.
Alfred Gofa, Liberia was not engaged in the slave trade in the Bassa Kingdom, the south of Liberia. Jeffrey also said the Berlin Conference was one of the worst things that ever happened to Africa. George, Katie, Africans talk about how brave, strong, and smart they are. I don't understand why we were treated so inhumane, and we took it then, and we are still taking abuse from white people today.
Sure.
This one is a question from Ahmed K. Salib. When was sovereign territorial waters and continental shelves of Liberia legally established? By whom, historically, have we paid attention to and appreciated the importance of territorial waters? You want to take that question before I go to the next one?
Just go through. I'll answer them.
All right.
I mean, that's a maritime question, which I happen to know the answer to, but I'll go through those. I'll go through those as well.
Okay. Tobasi say, folks, I told you it all started from the foundation of Liberia, 1822, 1847 and beyond. The Americans did not teach the American Liberians how to be responsible handlers of power. In return, the American Liberians failed to teach the indigenous Liberian people how to be responsible handlers of power. Until we as Liberians can study the past, we cannot fix the future. It's said to be continuing.
That's absurd. But
Zion said there was no such people called Americo-Liberians. All right, you earlier spoke that there were kingdoms all in the north there, and we were not waiting around for African Americans to come and teach us how to, in the words of Tubasi, how to handle power, because we're already handling power.
I mean, that's what a white supremacist worldview to think that, other people. I mean, we talk about how old of a people we are. Being conquered and being defeated does not mean that you're an idiot. It doesn't mean that you are incapable of doing human things that other human beings do. It is no one's responsibility to teach us how to handle power. It is a right of being human. It is a process of being a human being. And so a lot of Liberians say this because they just repeat things. They don't really think about what they're saying. I mean, the disrespect of self that's in that statement is so extreme. It's so profound. You cannot have an iota of self-esteem and think of yourself as someone who needed to be trained to handle power, as if you're not a human being, as if you're some kind of subhuman that needed to be humanized. It's unfortunate that Liberia is producing people who think of themselves that way and their ancestors that way. We are the creators of a sense of democracy. Democracy is in itself as an African, having a council of elders to make decisions and having, even the model of having a legislature. These things are based on old African kingdoms and how ancient Ghana and Songhai and these places were governed. This is not the property of Rome. This is what Rome borrowed from Africa. This is our legacy. And so responsible handlers of power, this is our birthright. This is not something that others had to come and teach us. So please disabuse your mind of that forever, because it doesn't serve you well. It is ahistorical. It is not accurate, and it's self-defeating. Disabuse your mind of the idea that it was someone's responsibility to teach you to do human things. The other question was about, this is why we call people Congos. Yes, there was a large number of recaptured Africans from the Congo Basin. And so in the 1880s, 1860s, you even read Benjamin Anderson's narrative, he took Congos with him to the north, to Musadu. And he referred in his narrative, it was like, my Congos, he would say, oh, I'm here with my Congos. Oh, my Congos are about to rebel and go back to the coast. And, he talks about his Congos. And this term, Anderson was African American. And so this term Congos was used by African Americans to describe recaptured Africans. But there was so much intermarriage over time that the entire population becomes blurred. Everyone's just called Congo, but that's where it comes from. But the African Americans and the descendants of African Americans clearly referred to the recaptured Africans in just generic terms as Congos, even if they were from, somewhere else. And then, I'm sorry, I thought I would remember all the questions, right, but I didn't.
That's why I'm here.
Okay.
The sovereignty, territorial waters and continental shelves.
Yes. So this is not really this is something that's determined by the International Maritime Organization. They come up with the 20 miles off the coast is your sovereign territorial waters, and what becomes international waters. These things are documented. If you Google IMO, it's uniform for every sovereign country. So they cannot say Liberia's territorial boundaries, territorial waters are 10 miles, while Sierra Leone's are 20 miles. It's the same for every country that's a member of the IMO. It is just what's determined as far as your territorial waters are concerned and what you're responsible to police and control. But that's a maritime question, not a history question.
If we went to Guinea, you see all the way to Zerikore, that's part of Liberia, or used to be. Same way, San Pedro on the Maryland side.
He was more talking about territorial waters is going out into the ocean. not
no,
the
I'm
coast.
starting up for the comment of the question here.
Oh, okay.
So David Colley is saying, will Liberia get back her land from Guinea and Ivory Coast? That question has been re-echoed here by Evan Morris. If we wanted to reclaim land that originally belonged to Liberia, and we're talking about Zerikoli and other areas, how do we go about it?
I don't think that's really realistic. And there's two reasons why. The people who live in Guinea are clearly identifying themselves as Guinean today. And much of that, the boundaries are now settled, unfortunately. And a lot of the land that was lost to these other countries, in some cases, was lost because of the people living in the countries being duped into siding with the French or siding with the British against Liberia, which I'm going to get into shortly. So they made a decision to fight Liberia because they thought that they were fighting for themselves, but they were actually fighting against themselves. This still continues to this day. We're always used against each other by the same people. It's like it worked. It worked in 1880. It worked in 1980. It's working in 2022. History. People say history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. It absolutely repeats itself. If you do something and it works, you keep doing it as long as it works. And one thing that works against Africans is weaponizing us against each other. And it is the story of Liberia, and it is part of the reason, not all of the reason, but it is part of the reason we've lost a lot of territory, because we fought ourselves, unfortunately, committed treason against ourselves, and lost territory. And then, the unfortunate thing is, in situations where territory was lost to these Europeans, the people on the other side of the border faced tremendous hardship and torment under European rule, under European colonialism. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well.
All right, so let's go back to our short slide here. We in this Berlin conference, these people meet and say, hey, I mean, we can let them go instead of bringing them here and having problem with intermarriages and having to send them back. Let's go there and take the place. But then there is this little country.
Well, there was no problem with intermarriage because there was nobody. You couldn't marry a slave. You could rape a slave,
right?
You could have a child. You could have children. Yeah. It was never the men raping white women. It was white slave owners and plantation hands raping African women, and the children, the offspring of those children, would be slaves. So you're just making more slaves because your station as a slave was whatever your mother was. That's what you were. So your father could have been the president of the United States. If your mother was a slave, you were a slave, because slaves could only give birth to slaves.
And then some of these people, they didn't want them among them, right? Say, hey, you can't be here, this causing problem. In fact, there is a revolt in Haiti. We send these people back. Now let's follow them and take over the land. But as you said, there is Liberia, a sovereign country. So they're there. Africa is now partitioned. We have the French, the British, all like almost surrounding Liberia. What was the threat that posed to the boundaries?
So I guess I'm not understanding the question. You're saying why was it?
Well, a threat? We have the French in what we know today, Guinea and Ivory Coast. We have the British in Sierra Leone. Did that threaten the territory or the borders of Liberia?
So when they divided the land at the Berlin Conference, they didn't touch Liberia initially, because Liberia had already been recognized as sovereign. So, but they all understood that Liberia stood as basically as an agitator, as an inspiration to other Africans to say, well, if the Africans in Liberia can be sovereign, so can we. Why do we have to be, subjugated by Europeans? Hence Samori Touré. So what ends up happening is the British start looking for, and the French, they start because they're the ones that are surrounding Liberia. they start looking for reasons to instigate conflict or reasons to take over the territory. The biggest reason, the most outrageous reason, was that the Liberian government didn't have control over its territory. They didn't really, it was just, a figment of their imagination. In fact, all of these Africans in the green, as we showed you on the map, that whole group of people are actually not even Liberian. They're just rampant savages, and we need to control them. That was the Europeans' perspective. The Liberians' perspective was, no, they're within our territory. They have a right to self-determination, as do we. And you do not have a right to take their sovereignty away from them. So Liberia is now in a situation where they have this massive territory to the north. They understand the assignment, they understand what's going on. They understand that they want to come and not only they want to take these people and make Liberia either this little slither of land on the coast, or conquer everyone. Whatever the case, neither option is good, because the Liberians know that these people in the north have a right to own their land and have a right to control their territory. Plus, the Liberians know what occurred in North America. They understood the brutality. They understood what was going to happen under colonialism. They understood subjugation. They understood, ripping people's rights away from them. Forced labor. They understood what was about to go down. So what do? The Liberians start frantically trying to figure out, how are we going to get the people in the Northern Territory to become part of and buy into this concept of Liberia. The British had an issue, and so did the French. In the northern western part of Liberia, there was wars between the Mendi, Kisi, that whole group up there. And the Liberians, the people living within the Liberian territory, would go into what is now British territory. Before the Berlin Conference, if you go and raid a clan on the other side of the river or across the forest, you were not invading British territory, you were just invading that clan's territory. Now these clan wars are considered international, trans-border invasions. So now the British are arguing that technically Liberians are invading British or French territory anytime indigenous nations would have war or conflict with neighbors that fell within the territory of the British or the French. I want you to think about that for just a moment. So if the Kisi or Mandingo or Loma people decide that they are going to retaliate against someone that lives now in British territory of Sierra Leone, right, they are now crossing, is now considered an invasion of Liberians into their territory.
Cross-border attack.
Yes. So the British now have a reason to assert themselves over Liberian territory. So Liberia in 1906 goes running to the US for help. They wrote letters. They got on ships. They said, hey, the British are instigating wars just so that they can say that our people in the north are invading their territory because they want to take over. They want to take over control of these people. And the Americans are like, well, they should take over the control of these people because you can't. And America is not as powerful as England and France at this point in history. That's also important to note. Britain and France are much more powerful than the United States at this point, which is why the United States didn't get any territory at the Berlin Conference, because they were weak. They were not a world power. They were not a superpower at that time. The Berlin Conference was for the powerful. And so the United States didn't have the ability to really fight the British. But the Liberians, being as educated as they were, especially our president at the time, Barkley, these are guys that were like, you know what? We're going to write letters. We're going to talk about how they're attacking our sovereignty. We're going to defend our northern territory against their incursion. and express their explicit right to self-determination, and they were extremely successful. So the British then say, okay, you have to then create a military. And you have to create a military, and you have to go and you must be able to control these wars that are occurring in your territory, or we're going to take it from you.
So Carl, who were the Liberians writing the letters to?
Basically the international community.
Yeah.
So you're talking about, a time period where their sovereignty is recognized. So you can write to the British government, you can write to the US government, you can say, hey, you guys are violating treaties and laws here. So you have several letters that were written to both the British Crown, and at this time, England is a kingdom. You've got, they're writing all of these letters, and they're making very strong arguments as to why the British should not invade their territory.
And Liberians were lawyers and diplomats. So
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so that's the other thing that was disturbing about one of the comments is that, oh, they didn't know how to govern. If these people had been stupid, there would be no Liberia today. If Liberians had been stupid, there would be no Liberia today. The fact is, they were brilliant legal minds. They understood justice. They understood right and wrong. They understood sovereignty. And they asserted their sovereignty at a time when Europeans didn't recognize them as full-fledged, Americans did not recognize Black people or African people as full-fledged human beings. Here are African people saying, yes, we're full-fledged human beings, and we have treaties that must be respected. Yet they did not have a military. They had the mind, but they did not have the power to exert their rights or to protect their rights. So the British come in and they're going to put together, they're going to train sort of a frontier forces, the precursor to the frontier forces. Many people think it was America that started the Liberian military. It was England with very, very selfish reasons. They brought in a general from South Africa. He comes into Liberia. Liberian government says, okay, we're going to put a group of native, mostly native, when I say native, I use the word loosely. I don't really like the word, but indigenous Liberian guys together. We're going to train them because they needed to know the languages. They need to know how to speak the languages. If they're going into the interior to try to protect the boundaries, they had to come from there. So they needed to be able to know how to communicate with the chiefs, the kings, or whoever they're going to encounter to try to protect the boundaries. So the British agree. What did the British do? They bring in Sierra Leoneans. They bring in a whole bunch of African Sierra Leoneans, so Black Sierra Leoneans, and mix them up with the Liberian military. Sierra Leoneans who are loyal to the British Crown, with the idea that they were going to overthrow the Liberian government.
Hold on. Before we get into that, let me take you back to this whole, because it's very easy to look at America those days as the America today. But you were saying they were weak. So when Liberia asked for help,
their help is just plenty talking, because they can't fight the British. It's just more talking. They just need another diplomatic voice. So it's really diplomatic help that they're looking for.
Right, but at that time too, I don't know if that could be a factor that America still did not think that ex-slaves should be a country, that they have no respect for Liberians, trying to assert themselves as a sovereign nation. Did it have anything to do with that?
Some members of the legislature didn't want to be bothered with Arthur Barkley and his shenanigans, and they felt that let those Negroes be colonized, But America also understood that Liberia, selfishly, was part of their economic interests as well. They didn't have a seat at the table for the Berlin Conference, and they saw the potential. There were actual arguments on the floor of the House, and some of the representatives were saying, "Hey, this is our extension, and this is our interest. This is also our economic interest that's being threatened here. We don't even know what kind of wealth lies in this territory that the British are trying to take. And these are our former slaves. So we do have interest, economic interest in this, vested interest in this as well. And so the people who felt, not because they wanted Liberia to have sovereignty, but because they wanted Liberia to be potentially under their control, because they understood that the European nations were going to amass a lot of wealth, from their territories. They too were like, wait a minute, if we let these guys take over Liberia, we're going to lose out on resources as well. Mind you, this is a period of time when they're fighting and exterminating the Native Americans, and they're pushing, the United States is pushing their territory westward. Right. We're talking about the 1880s. So they're fighting and killing indigenous people, poisoning them with smallpox. I mean, giving them a blanket tainted with smallpox to wipe out populations. They're trying to acquire land by means of genocide, right, so that they can build wealth. And then they're looking at Liberia as another possibility. So they're weak internationally. They're trying to build themselves up as a superpower. They're doing so by conquering the indigenous people on the continent that they settled in the East, and they're pushing their power west. Right. So Arthur Barkley, Arthur Barkley was the president at this time. He was very respected by the indigenous people, especially the Day Gola. He spoke these languages. Many people don't know that. He lived among them when he was a child. The legend goes that he was kidnapped when he was 6 years old during one of the wars they had, and then they brought him up among them for a few years like he was one of them, and he learned dialect and always remained close to that aspect. So he always felt a kinship with the Day and Gola people. So some of the soldiers that were being trained by the British were Day and Gola. Some were from different ethnic groups. A lot of them were Pele, people from up the St. Paul River, Mandingo, different ethnic groups from Liberia. And some of the Liberian soldiers was able to get message to President Barkley that, hey, the British are planning to overthrow the Liberian government. They have planted Sierra Leoneans among those that they are training and arming to go into the north. So when Barkley got this information, he immediately expelled the British officer that was training the soldiers, expelled the Sierra Leoneans, wrote the British government informing them of what happened. The British government then pretends to not have known what was happening, and they, in turn, do not punish this general that they sent to train. Right. They just basically shamefaced it, didn't see it coming, kind of thing. So that was one of the things that saved Liberia, because they were poised to destroy the country from within by bringing these moles that were loyal to England. And that kind of thing actually continued. I mean, you hear about the Kisi conflict with Lomax in the Northwestern Territory. They talk about, they hung these Kisi chiefs. Well, these people were Sierra Leoneans, or they were loyal to the British, and they were fighting against Liberia. This theme continued throughout our boundary disputes. And I want us to look at it this way. If you are existing as, let's say you're a Kisi chief, or you're a global chief in the East, and you have, for the most part, enjoyed autonomy within the Liberian territory. Right. And now Liberia is trying to assert itself over your territory, saying, hey, you can no longer cross into England. If you're going to trade, you have to pass through the correct channels. You now have to follow our laws. You cannot interact with England. You cannot interact with France. You have to, the government will interact. You cannot do it on your own. In their minds, they're like, who are these, uppity, funny dressing, funny talking Africans on the coast? Who do they think they are? We have been interacting with these Europeans for hundreds of years. You're not going to come now and tell us all of a sudden that we can't do this. It's because it wasn't really understood what this Berlin Conference, the consequences, the implications of the Berlin Conference were. They didn't have territory to fight for anymore. It was already decided. So any interaction they're having with the Europeans is just pure trickery. It would have never been to their benefit, but they didn't understand things that way. So they positioned themselves in such a way to fight against Liberia. But there were only really two options after the Berlin Conference. You either are Liberian or you're colonized. You're either Liberian or you are colonized. Samori Toure understood this. Samori Toure understood, I am either, you know, he didn't call it Liberian, but he wanted to align with Liberia, and he wanted to suck all of West Africa into this greater, you know, Islamic state. His mindset was, he knew that they were what this colonial people were going to do.
Yeah.
And so, other than Samori Toure, there were other smaller pockets of people who also started to understand what was happening. What was happening. So if you look at the northern boundaries of Liberia, if you put up the current map of Liberia, and this is just a general overview, by the way, everyone. There's a lot of rich detail here. I'm just telling the broad picture to, you know, spark your interest so you can, you know, do more research, or we can do another show where we get into detail about specific disputes. But I think it's important to have. So, I mean, this again is the old, you know, Liberian territory before the encroachment. I want you to show the current map of Liberia. And I want, did I send it to you or no?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you pull up a current map? You want me to send you one?
Yeah, I'll pull up current one. Just go ahead.
Okay. So basically, if you look at Liberia, that old map that Dennis just put on the screen, where Liberia is straight across in the north, including all of Zerikore. Have you ever wondered why Lofa and Nimba stick up into what is now Zerikore and they did not get cut off? Why is there this huge dip? It is because of resistance. Lofa and Nimba that are poking way up into what is now Guinea were always part of the Liberian territory, and so was everything in between Lofa and Nimba. Those areas that Samori Toure controlled were conquered, and those areas that remained within Liberia by choice, because they understood who their enemy was, and they fought to remain Liberian. And to this very day, you go to Lofa, you go to Nimba, those places that stick up into Guinea, to this very day, those areas that were not defeated by the French, those people resisted French encroachment. Those people, those warriors shed blood to remain Liberian. This is important to note. A lot of historians like to gloss over this and make it sound like, you know, the British, or the French in this case, they like to make it sound like the French just were like, oh yeah, you guys can go ahead and have Nimba and Lofa and all those. That's not what happened. That is not what happened. There was fierce resistance. And after, I skipped a part, when Barkley, you know, expelled the British, when Arthur Barkley expelled the British, he called upon African American troops. The American government sent African American Buffalo Soldiers. I want you to think about this. They were using Black soldiers in America. They called them Buffalo Soldiers because they were fighting in the western territory of the United States. They were fighting Native Americans. They basically sent out kind of like Marines, like minesweepers, go and fight the savage Indians, you know. So when the United States realized their interests, they took these Buffalo Soldiers and sent them to Liberia. They sent African American troops to Liberia, many of whom had been fighting Native Americans in the West, and they sent them to train Liberians in modern warfare techniques. And they were the ones who were trained. Some of the warriors were traditional fighters, fighting alongside those who were trained by the African Americans and in many cases fighting alongside African Americans, defended our borders against France and were successful. The success story is that Nimba and Lofa are a part of Liberia today. It is not by force, it was by choice. It was not even just by choice, we fought for it. Our ancestors fought to maintain our Liberianness. It was not forced upon us. So when I talk about there's not one story, one narrative of people that we call native, it is important to understand that there are different experiences in different places at different points in time. In the Southeast, those who were fighting for the French against the Liberians, their descendants are Ivorian today. All that Sao Paulo area, that whole region, where you have cultural and linguistic similarity to Liberians, the people on the other side of the border, that was a choice that was made. They chose to fight against, or not against, but in favor of the French. They joined the French, and their descendants come into Liberia to farm and hunt today because they don't have land, but we do. It's the same thing, you know, all over the place. You have people coming into Liberia from Sierra Leone, all over. We were once a continuous people. I have cousins on the other side of the border, on the other side of the St. John River, my blood relatives that are Mono people like myself, but they're Francophone Mono people. They're French. They think they're French. They speak French. And you know, are they better off than we are? No, they're not. They're not. You know, the people on our side of the border, we own our land. We can farm there. We can do what we want to do there.
Call explain when you say those people in San Pedro, also the people in Boso, Zerekore, and if you go on the other side, Gegedu area, Masanta, you say it was by choice. Explain that.
I mean, I'm being a little bit simplistic.
Okay.
And you know, when I say choice, I'm talking about leaders, not the subjects of the leaders. Because if you're not a chief or somebody with power in the society, it's not a choice. You're at the will and mercy of whatever your leaders decide. Right. So I was being very simplistic.
And they didn't probably understand what was going on. They thought they were doing it.
I mean, we don't understand what's going on in 2022. You hear people saying, "Oh, what about this group that they hung? They did this, they did that." Okay, tell me what led up to it. What was the reason that there was this conflict? Oh, they were encroaching on our land. Who was encroaching on what land? You're talking about after the Berlin Conference when the Europeans were coming in to take everything. So who was the encroacher? Was it Liberia or was it France? Who was the encroacher? Was it Liberia or was it Great Britain?
And call this question always coming. I know you've answered it so many times. River Says Pro, you know, I don't know where River Says Pro has been during our previous sessions. Is asking, will colonization have benefited us? Most colonial nations look better.
Okay. I don't see Liberian people in the streets of Guinea selling peanuts, Liberian Pella people. I see Guinean Pella people in the streets of Liberia selling peanuts and cola nuts. Is the condition of the Pella man in Guinea better than the condition of the Pella man in Liberia? Where is Guinea's Jewel Howard Taylor? Is the condition of the Lama man in Guinea better than the condition of the Lama man in Liberia, or the Mono woman in Guinea? Is her condition better than the Mono woman in Liberia? Infrastructure built for the extraction of resources and the benefit of those who are extracting the wealth, infrastructure that was built by slave labor, is what you're calling better. I mean, I've never seen a country where freemen envy the chains of slaves, is what we're doing. When we talk about colonial countries being better freemen envying the chains of slaves. We can do it ourselves. We're human beings. If we want to build infrastructure, if we decide we're going to run our country and manage our country, we can do that. It is a choice we can make. But to sit and envy other people's suffering, envy people who were conquered and tormented on their own soil, made landless on the same soil of their ancestors, and we envy that because we don't understand what we have, what a blessing we have. And we don't understand that we fly the Liberian flag over Butuo, over Zerikore. I'm sorry, not Zerikore, over Zwedru, over Tiwa. We fly the Liberian flag over these places by choice.
Thank you. Another question here or request. Talking about the letters that were written by Barkley and other Liberians, could you read an excerpt of one of the letters written to the international community if you have it handy? Or you can tell David where he can.
I'll send one to Dennis and he can post it later. I have a whole archive of letters. I can send a couple to Dennis. If you don't mind posting it, Dennis.
Sure.
Then they can follow you, yeah.
Kala Genesis said the Grebo and Vi sided with Liberia.
Some. There's Grebo people in Ivory Coast who did not. The Vi in Sierra Leone, so King Massaquoi had his mother's kingdom on the other side of the Makino River and then his father's kingdom on our side. And some of his cousins, his relatives, fought with the British against his people. So the British did a lot of proxy wars. Europeans do proxy wars a lot of times. So they conquered, these are his relatives fighting for power. They felt that, if they fought with the British, we won't be under Massaquoi anymore. We'll be on our own. We'll be free. They didn't understand that they weren't going to be free. They didn't. So Massaquoi sovereign Massaquoi, he's over the Vi kingdom, which was recognized as a sovereign country by the Liberian government, a sovereign, within the territory. He's lost his mother's territory because his own cousins, his own family, raised army against his army on behalf of the British. So Massaquoi then goes to the Liberian government and says, I throw myself at your mercy. I need to save what's left of my kingdom. I will, and the Liberian government says, you can be Liberian, but you have to give up your crown. And that is how Massaquoi became the last king of the Vi kingdom. He became a Liberian. He gave up his crown and became a Liberian and ended up being appointed, I think he was Minister of the Interior and became a Liberian diplomat. But at the bottom line was he knew that he needed to become Liberian in order to protect his people from the British. So, when people talk about, the Vi or the Grebo, it's not just one group of people. We're talking about a massive ethnic group with conflicts within it. A lot of these wars that were occurring were happening between people who spoke the same language. When Suakoko later on, about 20, 30 years after this period we're discussing, when Queen Suakoko was fighting people in the interior and went to the Liberian government for protection, she was fighting other people who spoke Pele. Yeah. She wasn't fighting, people from Musadu. She wasn't fighting people from Puta Jalon. She was fighting people that spoke the same language. So we should never speak of ethnic groups in an absolute, as if everybody was just one little tribe or band of people making a decision together. That's why you never hear me use the word tribe. It's diminutive. We're talking about massive groups of people with complex relationships, even within the ethnic group. There was not cohesion, especially in the Southeast, even more so than in the North and the Western Territory. The Southeast, every clan was onto itself. Every clan was onto itself. And so your clan and this other clan, you talk about the Grebo Wars and all this stuff, each clan was onto itself. So most of the cultures in the Southeast didn't have that strong central authority outside of their clan. They didn't, feel this cohesion. So their way of governance was different. So we should not ever speak of African ethnicities in that kind of absolute terminology.
This was not like one homogeneous group. This was separate,
No.
separate in the southeast, where you see the Grebels have so many. There is a small part of Grebel in Sino County known by different names. You have like
Yeah.
6 or 7 sub-Grebel groups in River G. You have
Mm-hmm.
some Grebel groups in Grand Cru, then Maryland. And these
Mm-hmm.
people, the languages are different. They are not completely the same. Very similar, but different. So
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense to me because even now, those differences are very clear.
And they've always been there. They've always been there. And so that's just one of the things, the lessons that we need to understand. I mean, people group all indigenous Liberians together like that. You can't even group.
I got a cut on her leg.
Okay.
Uh,
Hang on 1 second, Dennis.
yeah.
Sorry about that.
We go for a short break and we're going to be right back. Welcome back. Let me read a few comments here. William King, great grandson of Charles David King, said before Charles David King was president, he was heavily involved in these discussions with the British. Joseph Curtis Brewer, this is a brilliant mind. Where has she been? Talking about Call now. For nation building, she is amazing. Jimmy Ismail is asking why we could not maintain our own name. Which name, Jimmy? He said we would have been part of the British Orchestra French Empire, right? And
I don't know what he's asking.
yeah, Jimmy, please be a little clearer. Afri said, thank you so much for this presentation, Mrs. Family. Is it possible for me to get access to this presentation and previous ones? Yes, please visit us, Focus on Liberia on YouTube. And we are still working. Okay, good. We say subscribe to our YouTube channel and you'll have all this. Stella Jeffrey said this needs to be a class for our children in the diaspora. And support us. We're on our way. Laura David, here's the legacy of the African Americans and the Black diaspora in Liberia over the last 200 years since 1822. African Americans play a key role in the formation of Liberia. Black Americans wrote the Liberian 1847 Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Okay.
So I think people wanted to call in.
Yeah.
I got a couple of text messages. I'm sorry, everyone. I deactivated my Facebook account, but I did get a couple of text messages about people wanting to call. And I also, there was another statement made earlier. I forgot to answer. Someone made a statement or asked a question about whether or not Bassa, they called it the Bassa Kingdom, participated in the slave trade. The answer is absolutely yes. Bassa people, everyone. Every ethnic group had participants in the transatlantic slave trade. Trade Town was one of the last places that abolished that the transatlantic slave trade was stamped out, and that's in Bassa proper. And so, yeah, that was definitely something that needed to be corrected.
If you want to join the conversation, please call the number 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#. Please join the conversation and contribute. This is Liberian History Channel, and who else should talk about our story but ourselves?
Exactly.
Jimmy Ismail said, well put, Call. Why should we envy the chains, dehumanization, and suffering that our brothers endure under colonialism? and we still keep talking about we could have done better. And Claudia asking you to write a book. And let me inform our audience that there's been request for us to transcribe what we do here at Focus on Liberia into books. And so if you are willing or you are able or you want to be a part of such projects, please get in contact with me and let's start something. Bobby say, hello, Mrs. Famula and Brother Dennis. I love Mrs. Famula. Bobby, what's about me? We got a caller here on the line. And if you want to call, please, the number is on the screen. Mr. Elvis Morris, you are live on Focus on Liberia. Thank you for always trying to be a part of the discussion. Go ahead, you are live, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jack. And thanks to Ms. Call for the presentation. It was very informative. Quickly, I just want to, I guess it's a comment / a question. For example, in Ivory Coast, right, where you have what they refer to as the Grand West, the Big West. And it's almost like, for them, it's like the American territories of the Western expansion, because they gain a lot of land, you know, from, like she said, conquering Liberia to the west. You have actually more, for example, the Dons, or, you know, the Guilds in Liberia, the Ways, the Crime. You have a lot more of them on that side of the border than in Liberia. There's almost over like 1 million dying, you know. You have big cities like Tanneh-Chewlae, you know, on that side of the border where it's like, you know, even for the Ways, the Crimes in Liberia, there's up to like 600,000 of them on that side of the border. So I'm wondering, you know, is it because of our civil war, the population disparity is so much in terms of what's on the other side of the border in Liberia, or is it just that a lot of them kind of, I guess, you know, went to the French side in the Ivory Coast? So maybe she can give us some clarity on that. Thank you.
So you have the Yakuba and Danane.
Yes. So this is, remember the last time we were talking about the Don or Gil, the Don. I don't like to use the term Gil. I wish we would change that, because Gil actually means slave. It's a derogatory term. I don't know whose idea it was to call the Don people Gil. They don't call themselves that in their own language. But the Don, the Kran, they are culturally similar. They have the same or similar cultural behavior like the Grebo and other people from that are eastward. And majority of their ethnic group is falling within what is now the Ivorian boundary, where the Mono people are more culturally similar to Loma, Pele, Kisi. It's because this boundary was drawn called Nimba that people think they're the same people, but there's a lot of cultural differences. The ancient Poro tradition being one of them. The Mono belong to one belief system, and the Dan, Akran, others belong to another. So yes, I mean, they're the same people. The boundaries in Africa are arbitrary all over the continent, because when they, even without the encroachment on Liberian territory, if you look at the rest of Africa, they arbitrarily drew lines without regard to who was living on what side of what line. So even in areas where were not traditionally Liberian territory, that were not conquered, you know, the Grebo would go there, and the French would say, oh, they entering our territory. Well, the Grebo had always been going there. They never felt that it was, you know, foreign territory. So you're correct in your assessment and your observation. Being in Ivory Coast, yes, the majority of the culture does fall on the Ivorian side of the border.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Stanley someone said this program needs to be broadcast in Liberia. Right now we have a partnership with Prime FM 105.5, and on a weekly basis, to keep all our programs on the radio in Liberia, the total budget is $600. That's little money. So we need all the support we can so that we can keep all our beautiful programs on the radio in Liberia. We started right now, we are using 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, because we're not making money. We are doing this from our family's budget. So
Exactly.
we encourage all of you to support us so that we can have these programs in Liberia. Focus on Liberia is by far, and I can say anywhere, the best in the history of the country, because there is no radio program, no TV program in the diaspora that offers the diversity and the variety of programs, culturally enriching, educative, and informative that we do here on Focus on Liberia. So contact us, get in touch with Focus on Liberia, and see how you can help so that we can do our best in elevating what we are doing right here. I gotta say, okay, that's a little talking about the same with the people saying Gio instead of Dan. Christopher said there's nothing such as crown. We call ourselves Gao people. So Gao or Gao people. Oh, and then Bobby E writes.
That's true.
Bobby come back and say, "I love you too." So call us, or the number is on the screen there. So please call and be a part. To understand the boundaries between and among Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea at the lower end, you have to dig in to know why the Kisi people settled in Kondo, Sierra Leone, Gegedu in Guinea, and Foya, Liberia. Why the Kisi fought against the Bandi and got land to settle. It is a history that is not written. Evans, please, you can, whatever you know about this, please share with us. Stella Davis, Jeffrey say colonization was never better and will never be. We need to come together and rebuild our country without the involvement of the USA. The USA has a foot on Liberia's neck. Firestone needs to build a rubber plant factory in Liberia. And Call, the reason this thing keep coming back is we are not really, current day Liberia, we are not doing so well. So when people are suffering, they look back and say, oh, why not? Like, especially during the war, when we were hungry, I was wishing for just dry rice with red oil, right?
Yeah.
So is that what is contributing to this kind of mindset?
It's unfortunate, because if we were faced with the challenges that our ancestors were faced with, we would absolutely make the wrong decision with our current state of mind. And it's dangerous, the way we think about ourselves, the way we've been made to understand how we got to where we are. It's dangerous. If we were ever faced with the option of selling ourselves, basically, we would make the wrong choice. We would make the unpatriotic choice. We'd commit treason if we needed to, because the way people think. It's easy for us to look and judge someone who supported the British against the Liberian government. It's easy to judge that person, but what would we do today if given the option? We have people who the Americans are not even approaching to commit treason. They're not even going out of their way to ask people to betray their country. People are forming organizations with the explicit purpose of begging America to help them betray their country. Can you imagine? That's what I see. That's what I see happening today. Imagine, people getting together and forming an organization, which only purpose of the organization is to lobby the U.S. government against their own country.
You mean like the sanction and stuff like that people talk about?
Not only just sanctions. I mean, we elect someone who we all probably almost unanimously agree is doing a terrible job. Legally elect this person instead of following our legal process, our correct process to correct the mistake. Anytime you elect someone you're not happy with them, you have another election, you choose somebody else. You don't go to foreign powers and try to sabotage your country.
It's important you said that, because someone called a colleague here that focused on Liberia was so excited that America is trying to do something so that the current president is removed. And my colleague at Focus on Liberia literally yelled at him, and how do you think it's going to work for Liberia? So yeah, so I understand where you're coming from, that people will go to a foreign country and say, hey, do this to us, or help us change our government illegally, or do whatever the end justifies.
Unconstitutionally, you know,
Yeah.
you know, the crew, the cloud people that say dig Debwe, everybody looks to America. I mean, this is, you know, we sit here enjoying, you know, the land sovereignty that people that were stronger than us fought for, and we sit in our pompous ignorance and condemn people who came before us when we don't even have a fraction of their courage and their tenacity and their self-respect. There's no way Arthur Barkley would have said some of the things that I hear being said today. You know, there's no way that Arthur Barkley would have said we're better off being colonized. But we look at these people, we have the audacity to say, oh, the Americans didn't teach them how to be human beings. They were men and women of dignity. They respected themselves. It was not the prerogative of anyone, and it is not the prerogative of anyone to teach you or give you your humanity. It is already your property. No one can give you your property. It is yours. And your lack of self-determination is not someone else's responsibility. It is yours. So we as Liberians, if we want Liberia to be better, we are the ones who are going to make it happen. No one's going to do it for us. It doesn't benefit anyone else to see us rise. It only benefits us. So inviting a wolf into the sheep's pen to go after one sheep, and you think that you yourself, you're not sheep, that will not eat you too? What are we thinking? You know, it gets back to that self-esteem. When do we understand that we are human beings? And human beings have a right to self-determination, not only a right, but a responsibility to manifest your own destiny. It is nobody's but yours. If you don't like the president, you have laws. Vote for someone else. And if you don't like that president, you have legislature. And even right now, before elections, you have lawmakers that you elected. Pressure them to do something about the situations that you don't like. Instead of lobbying somebody else's Congress, lobby your own. Lobby your own. You want to form a special interest group to go across the ocean and spend money bribing lawmakers in a foreign country to interfere, and so under you say intervene, but it's really interfere with your government. Why don't you use that money and lobby your own congressman?
True. And there's a question here called, have you really decided to go to LU and teach?
I probably will do that when I retire.
Right. And for me, I want to teach high school, and my preference is Sino High School, you know. And because I watched my two cousins, I mean, when they were teaching Sino High, I mean, they were, and that picture. So when I retire also, or before I retire, I want to be principal of Sino High School. That's my dream job.
That's awesome.
All right, if you're just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia. This is the Liberian History channel. We discuss history here, Liberian history, that is. And if you miss any of our episodes, please check out our YouTube channel and follow us. Tomorrow, I'm going to be hosting a group called Friends of Gonglo in the Diaspora, or Friends of Gonglo Global. I'm going to be hosting them here on Focus on Liberia. We're going to be live tomorrow on Prime FM. Ms. Councillor Gonglo is coming to the United States and his group, so we're going to be questioning them on what Councillor Gonglo plans to do for the country, and we're going to talk all that. That's politics tomorrow, right here on Focus on Liberia. Then on Thursday, we're going to have your favorite show, Tough Talking Thursday. And we're going to be looking at the opposition, the ruling party, and the road to 2023. What we're going to be looking at is what will it really take for someone to win the 2023? Will it be the messaging? Is it based on the message? Will it be money? Or will it be due to the problem? Let's say because CPP has disintegrated, so it's going to favor this person. Is it going to be that? Or who get a morale? We're going to check that out on Thursday on Tough Talking Thursday. Be my guest. On Sunday, 2 Liberian ladies who were once on drugs and living in the ghetto. One of them became a minister of the gospel, Anita Wanti. She's no longer on drugs and she's no longer living in the ghetto. She inspired another young lady living in the ghetto by the name Miss Odell Gibson. And now she too is not using drugs anymore. And she's clean. She wants to go to school, but now she's still living in the ghetto because she got no place to stay. This Sunday, they're going to be my guests right here on Focus on Liberia. We call that Saving the Zogos. We have a caller on the line. Caller, let's go. Your name and where you're calling from.
Let's go. Your name and where you're calling from. My name is Priscilla. I was calling to just agree with
Priscilla, hold on. Please lower turn off the what you are watching, your Facebook, so that we don't get the feedback. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carl, for the wealth of knowledge you've been sharing with us. I was reading an international peer-reviewed on a linguistic analysis of the national anthems of Ghana and Liberia by Dr. Esther Rabba and Elisha Matthew Eddy. The both of them are from the Department of English, University of Oyo. And the way that the analysis of the anthems will just, you appreciate what Carl is explaining when you read that this is a group, first of all, this is a group of Black people who were denied benefits from North America, come to this land, and in union were able to maintain a space for themselves during the period of time in history when Europeans were just playing games. They were on treasure hunting. It was just like a sport. It was their trade. They were just preoccupied with colonizing the entire continent. So in the midst of that kind of, environment, this group of people were able to hold their head up high, work together. It was so historic and important. It attracted the United States investment in infrastructure development, modernization, and the construction of airport facilities as quote-unquote compensation for supporting the U.S. against Germany. And it's just amazing that you see, bits and pieces of that kind of history in our national anthem. As they sing, all hail Liberia, hail, we will overall prevail.
Amen.
I mean, they show us strength and hope and optimism. That's why Paul keeps saying, how can we just keep confessing? How can we be confessed? I guess sometimes I try to blame it on the war, the way we think of ourselves. But Liberia was a proponent of Pan-Africanism and African independence from Europeans. Liberia became a founding member of the United Nations. Liberia was one of the major voices protesting against the apartheid policy in South Africa. I was at the airport when the late Brenna Fassie came down from the plane, took off her shoes, kissed the ground of the land and said, I prayed to come to this land because I heard what they did for us. other people from other countries, they really know stuff about us that we need to start looking into. Liberia was globally, I don't know, maybe Cole can confirm this, I'm not sure about this, but what I read was that Liberia was globally the second highest in economic growth after the U.S. Great deal of thing as a self-declared nation. Other nations got independence, Liberia declared. Liberia declared. And mighty be her power, Liberia retained its independence when other lands and people were being annexed during the struggle for Africa. And mighty be her power. It would only take a mighty power to partner against the German forces. Liberia prides itself as a mighty power to form this connection with the U.S. against Germany. With our hearts united, we were able today to have, like I say, if those people had not, if they didn't know right from wrong, we continue to think that these were not people who were thinking people that needed to be taught. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have what is Liberia today.
Yeah.
A home of glorious liberty. A home of glorious liberty. In union strong, success is sure. Native people and those that came later were able to work in union.
Yes.
And one thing those authors kept comparing with Ghana national anthem was that Ghana would say "may" in a national anthem, "may it lie." Liberia said we cannot fail. They didn't use "we may not," "we should not." They said we are not capable of failing. We don't have the ability to fail.
That's right.
Because Liberia was doomed with all the internal and external forces. But they said we cannot. It is not in our DNA to fail. Our right to prove with all the threats.
Yeah, we will overall prevail.
Will overall prevail.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to encourage us. I think we probably demoralized by a lot of different factors, and then the information gap, maybe because again I'll blame it on the war. I don't want to accuse people. Even though some of us, we really have the opportunity to educate ourselves. So please, people, we have people that came before us and left something for us to celebrate.
Yeah.
Let me end with this. I know what's his name, Dennis, is in a hurry to get me off.
Let
me end with this.
Okay.
Like, though we were bombarded by, like I already mentioned, internal and external aggression and continue, but we continue to have a praiseworthy, memorable past to look back to and a hopeful future to look forward to, replete with optimism. Liberia is a land of glory, the glorious land of liberty. It is right there. Liberia pursue freedom and liberty with its entire group of people. So please, people, let's change our mindset and attitude. Then I'll direct you to a new day. Well, thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you, Priscilla. Appreciate it. And that's why before we end our program, I always say, we are all Liberians, and let's do our part to make Liberia that glorious land of liberty that was envisaged by the people before us. Carl?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't really have much to say after all of those beautiful words by Priscilla. I just want everyone to know that no country has arrived at its destiny. It is always a work in progress. Liberia is a work in progress. Liberia has not yet been achieved. So you need to pick up the flame and carry it forward. That is the responsibility of our generation, is to carry the flame forward, not to talk about the pace in which it was carried in the past. If you can run faster than your ancestors, let's run faster than them. If we have to crawl and they were running, let's crawl. But we have to push forward this great vision that people who came before us had for us. They didn't leave us with nothing. They left us with the land. You know, as my friend Emmanuel will say, they left us with the land beneath our feet. That is more than most people have.
Yeah.
And so with that, you know, I just want us to know that it falls on our shoulders now
Right.
to push forward.
I met a man in the New York area. He's like maybe 60 or 70 years old, and guess what? He's still blaming his uncle back in my village, who did not send him to school when he was about 6, 7, 8 years old. He's in America. He's in his 60s, and that blame is still there. And here's how.
Yeah, no.
So there's a lot of things we can do to, or we can say, to blame the people before us. But what can we do now is the big question. This one from Francis: do not be so naive as to believe that the Western principles of divide and conquer has suddenly changed.
Exactly.
Francis, what's the basis of that? Please give me more. Priscilla, after talking for like 5 minutes, Priscilla has come back, and we love this. You see, I'm not trying to romanticize Liberia, but I'm saying, like, we are still becoming with what was left of us. And we can make it. You know, I was born in a village, and I saw the cutlasses our people made from the stones in the form of a sickle, right? They made those cutlasses. You know, they melted the iron and made those cutlasses. And I saw those cutlasses that they used to brush. You know, they're like this.
Mm-hmm.
What are we making today?
Wow, big mouth. We're making big mouth.
We're still trying to blame.
We're making big mouth and hating each other.
Let's conclude on our topic for tonight.
Yeah.
So we discussed all this. So let's conclude on this whole idea of Liberia, what Liberia did to retain its territorial boundaries.
So basically, Liberia fought for what we have left. We've said that repeatedly throughout the show, and it was also indigenous Liberian people whose blood was shed. You know, from the Vai who fought to defend Cape Mount against the British with King Massaquoi, Sovereign King Massaquoi, all of the sovereign Africans within the territory that worked along with the early frontier forces, the African Americans who helped train them and arm them, the chiefs and the leaders, indigenous chiefs and leaders who believed in their right to self-determination, the Central Liberian government who used their diplomatic and legal minds to argue against the tyranny of European encroachment. All of those things combined have brought us to where we are today. Liberia is the property of all of us. It exists with the consent of our forefathers. Nobody forced Liberia upon us. We could have been Guinean, we could have been Sierra Leonean, we could have been Ivorian. Somebody down our bloodline chose Liberia. It is for us.
Francis Wilson said, wasn't this the exact lamentation of the Israelites crying for the days of slavery in Egypt the minute they encounter a stumbling block? Exactly what I was speaking to as far as this mentality of our savior of the international community. This is the history that should also be taught in schools in Black communities in America. You know, and that reference of Sister Francis Wilson is making is when the people say, Moses, why did you bring us in this wilderness to die? Wasn't it better in Egypt? Why you brought us here? So
yeah, there were some of those too. There were some of those in Liberian history too. Some of them even went back to America.
You're right. And Professor Larry Davis, Dennis, let me know how I can donate. Thank you so much. You can donate to focus on Liberia by you can do Cash App or Zelle, and we will receive it. Just indicate what it's for so that we can route it appropriately. Thank you all, and even those who are going to donate in the future. We are again partnering with Prime FM 105.5 in Monrovia, and The total cost to have us on the radio 2 hours every day, Monday through Sunday, is $600. And if you can tell us, say, hey, Dennis, I'm paying for 1 month, here's the 600, then we are good for 1 month. You can call and say 2 months, 3 months. And by the time we are able to consistently do this for about a year, who knows where else this can lead us. So please donate. Amos Tia say, thanks to Mrs. Formula for the teaching. This was really informative. I agree. Dave say, education, education, education. Thank you so much, Carl. I want to thank you also for...
Thank you, Dennis. It's my pleasure.
I want to thank our viewers for always being here at Focus on Liberia. As we say, we never close our broadcast, any broadcast, without playing the song that says, we are all Liberians. Whether your ancestor came on the ship, or they came on foot, or they walked through Trump to Liberia, or they were there from the beginning of time, we are all Liberians. Whether you believe since 1822 till now, Liberia did nothing, or you believe that our people left us a foundation that we can all build on, we are all Liberians. What we shouldn't forget, though, is to do our best to make Liberia the glorious land of liberty. Have a good night, and God bless you.
We are Liberia. Liberia is our home.